starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the September Community IT Innovators webinar. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about planning for an office move. Today's webinar is part of our continuing series on IT management. My name is Johan Hammerstrom. I'm the President and CEO of Community IT and the moderator for this webinar series. We'd like to share a few webinar tips with you before we begin. Great. Most importantly, we encourage you to interact with us by asking questions via the GoToWebinar chat feature. We'd also like to remind you to avoid multitasking during the webinar. You may just miss the best part. If you do miss the best part or need to leave the webinar early, we will be posting links to the recording and slides on our website, YouTube channel, and SlideShare account. In case you're not familiar with Community IT, our skilled and certified team of IT professionals serves the Greater Washington nonprofit community, helping organizations of all sizes and capacities to advance their missions through the effective use of technology. We're deeply invested in the nonprofit community. We've worked with over 900 nonprofits since 1993, and we take a strategic and collaborative approach that fits the unique needs and culture of nonprofit organizations. And now it's my pleasure to turn the webinar over to two of our certified team of IT professionals and today's presenters, Rick Alloway and William Maxwell. Good afternoon, and please introduce yourselves.
Hi, this is Rick Alloway.
I'm William Maxwell.
And between the two of us, we've done about 50 moves with Community IT over the past 10 years. So we've got a lot of experience in this field, and they're happy to share some tips and answer any questions.
Let's get into it.
All right. So we're going to start out by doing this in a timeline format, but obviously everybody's office move is different in terms of when you actually get to stuff, when you can do things, things come up, leases fall through, you got to work around. So this is a general timeline, but you can do any of these things, the better.
Yeah, in general, we like the 6 months more to get started, just so we have room in case any of those things happen.
So first off, the ultimate goal here, well, one of our goals is to have your new IT room in your new office be neat and clean. You don't want to bring all the old junk with you.
It's important to determine what we can do ahead of time to help make the new space easier and make the space cleaner as we move into it.
Yep. So one of the things we recommend is to have your IT vendor know about your move well in advance. Again, we're saying 6 months out. And think about any of the projects that you might be able to do to clean up old servers, virtualize servers onto new hardware, move services to the cloud. Generally, just get any of the junk out of or get any of the old stuff out, do any projects you can.
And this is a good time to have an audit done just to see where you are and if any of these things can happen in a reasonable time frame before you get started with the office move.
So same idea, you want to minimize your IT footprint in the new office. You want to make sure you do any of these projects with enough leeway so that they can be finished and that you're comfortable with your new systems before the move, so that the move doesn't get in the way of any other projects.
Yeah, and a lot of times though, copier leases are easily switched over during the move, mostly because that's an external vendor and you don't really have a whole lot of work. It's swapping in one for another.
Yep, and the last point here that some of it should be done, that applies to hardware like wiring and just unmanaged switches. Anything that's just simple hardware that you're taking in and taking out, because you have to rewire the whole patch panel anyway for your new space, so you might as well get new wiring.
Agreed.
All right, so if you're going to build out a new office space, well, I should say there's two things you could be doing. One is renting an office that already exists, that already has a server room and already has offices and wiring. The other is taking over a new space and completely building it out on your own. So a lot of what you need to do is the same, but you think about it differently. So if you're building out your own space, you really want to plan where the network drops are going to go. And so you need to know how many staff you're going to have. Are you going to have 2 people per office? Are you going to have VoIP phones that all require their own networking?
And I'm going to interrupt just for a second. A lot of these questions that we're going through, you can go over with your IT vendor. They may be able to help you out, or your resident expert. So that could be your IT manager or coordinator, CTO, or your accidental techie, the person that just knows the most about the network.
Yep. And things to look at in your current server room. Do you have high voltage outlets? Because you'll need to make sure you have those in the new server room that you're looking at.
You want to, in general, we like to keep the servers off of the ground. Sometimes there are water hazards, mostly around sprinkler systems, even when you're 8 floors up.
Yep. Also a good time to think about your AV equipment. And if you have old Wi-Fi routers, it might be another good time. That's another thing that's easy enough to swap out when you're moving into a new space.
And you definitely want to remember that your new space is not going to be the same as your old space in many times. So you want to make sure what you have now will work in the new space, or just build out new Wi-Fi to build out the new Wi-Fi for the coverage you want to have.
All right, so now we're moving to about 3 months out, and the big thing to think about here is ISPs.
And other vendors, but ISPs, are you happy with them? Are you getting this a good speed for the cost? Like, in DC area, the Verizon and Comcast are the big ones, but they're not always the only game in town. So it could help you a lot, and you can do a lot better with cost per speed per month with a new contract.
Right. A lot of people just have an old contract with their ISP that hasn't changed in years, and they don't even know what deals are available. And also, a lot of buildings, at least in downtown DC where we are, have other ISPs in the building that aren't that you may not have heard of as a residential user. So you're gonna want to ask your landlord at the new office what ISPs are already in the building, and then call them and see what deals are available.
And it's also a good idea to think about getting a backup internet connection if you don't already have one. It's always good to have more than one with different vendors in case one goes down and the other one's still up, so you can still maintain the internet connection, as it's becoming more important to offices just around the world.
Yep, and ideally have them on different platforms. So have one be fiber and one be cable, or something like that, so that if infrastructure in the whole city goes down for some reason, you've got a whole different backup.
Yeah, that's mostly due That's mostly due because in DC, Verizon owns a lot of the internet wires that are buried existing. So if you've got Verizon and Comcast, that's good for balancing that out. But you know in your own area who's the ISPs. Verizon's the phone company and Comcast is the cable here in DC. But in Virginia and Maryland, there could be other vendors that do the same task.
Yep. So this slide is just something to think about when you're coordinating with your vendors. A lot of times, again, around here, Verizon owns the lines that come into the building, and then you might have a separate ISP that takes over the line and runs it up to your floor, and then you'll have your wiring contractor actually wire your office. But sometimes you just get a disconnect and nobody actually wires it from the networking closet near the elevators into your actual suite. And the building manager doesn't want to do it, the ISP doesn't want to do it, everybody thinks it's somebody else's problem. So it's just one of those gotchas you kind of got to keep an eye out for when you're planning these things.
Not anything to really worry about. I know a lot of times the moves I've done lately has not been an issue. More ISPs want to be full service, but it's something to be aware of, just in case it applies to you.
Yep. So to that end, there's always things that are going to go wrong, no matter how well you plan it all.
And 3 months out is a good time to start thinking about your contingency plans.
Yep. So the worst thing that can happen is the internet doesn't come through. But there's about a million other things that can happen. I think we mentioned later in here that if you have cloud services for emails, your website, all that, it really goes a long way to minimizing the worst possible things that can go wrong in an office move.
But yeah, more or less, a lot of this is just we can't hit home enough. Like, make sure the ISP is square and on schedule, because that's the one thing we just can't replace or patch around. If you don't have internet, you don't have internet, and
yeah, and your new office doesn't do anything.
yeah.
So another important thing is staff. This is a good time to get the big players in your office involved. So not just the office manager and the executive director. You want all the directors, all the bigwigs in your company to be involved in this move. So make sure there's no big events coming up at the same time as the move. You want to have them meet with IT management and vendors, and you really just want to make sure everybody's on the same page and involved. Because the worst thing that can happen is people don't pay attention to the communication about it and then get caught unawares.
Yeah, like, it may seem like a good idea to do the move while everyone's off at a conference or in a big meeting, but with the big meeting comes big preparation, and ultimately you'll probably just end up doing all the work yourself, and it may not be done right or fully.
Yep, and they won't be happy about it.
Not at all.
All right, so now we're getting a little closer to the actual move. It's time to really start planning your new office. So if you're taking over an existing office, you really want to check and make sure the wall jacks are labeled. That's just really important for troubleshooting as you build out your office. If they're not, definitely recommend having a wiring contractor come in and tone out all the jacks and relabel them. Another thing is take a look at the server room you're taking over. A lot of times there's old equipment still on the plywood in the server room, like old PBXs and I don't know, just all kind of old stuff you run into.
Yeah, sometimes you want to take that old stuff out, but I've also had times where the old wiring proved to be useful with a new move. So you just want to know what's there, and hopefully it's labeled correctly.
Yep.
If not, this would be a good time to have your cabling wiring vendor come out and take a look.
Yeah, and you can talk to the building manager and make sure that it's stuff that you can rip out and throw away and not part of the building's infrastructure or something.
Usually that's not the case, but
yeah.
Good to know. And also, I can't say enough about the ISP. Sometimes if you have to build, sometimes ISPs will come to your building if they're not already there. It's important to factor that in, and a lot of times it's prohibitively expensive to have someone come in, ISP come in and bring a new internet connection. So again, make sure to check with your new building management to see what's in the building if you haven't found out already.
Yeah, and then the last one here, when you're planning your new office or your new server space, you do want to make sure it's secure or at least able to be locked. Yeah, sometimes in very small offices, people just have servers sitting out on a table somewhere. You really want to get a lockable cage where you can keep everything all contained and secure. And preferably just have it all behind a door that can be locked.
Yeah, and I guess it's also important to mention, too, with the wall jacks, when you're counting, keep in mind that with voice over IP phones and printers, you need to account for those devices as well. And sometimes non-voice over IP phones. You usually can cable the same cable for analog phones as well as digital and voice over IP phones. Our best practice or our ideal situation is to have them each get their own jack. But in a pinch, you can do daisy chain.
Yep. And you can always run phone line over Ethernet jacks.
Yeah.
So if you're getting to rewire your office, do everything Cat6 just so that you're covered for all eventualities. So this is also just in general, your current server room probably has a lot of junk in it. So you want to do this well ahead of the move, is just start cleaning out. A lot of it can be recycled, a lot of it can just be thrown away. There are plenty, you'll have to look up a good place to recycle in your area, but I know DC has a lot of options.
Yeah.
Also, to prevent junk in your new space, make sure you get shelves or separate closet, because server rooms tend to get used as storage space if you don't protect your space. Also a good reason to have a lock on the door.
And when planning your new wire closet, we recommend mounting the switches right up against the patch panels, so we can have small 6 or 1 foot cables later for tech support to take a look and see what goes where, as similar to this picture we have here.
Yeah, so we have the patch panel is just 24 and 24. The top are for phones. They just go to the phone switch. The bottom are for internet and go to the internet switch. You can see there's no tangles, no big loops of wire. It's really nice to be able to do this when you're moving space and actually having a chance to rip everything out of your closet and put it in a new space and nice and clean.
Yeah, and the different colors help a lot too.
Yep. So also at this point, it's time to start thinking about what you're going to need for the move. If you're going to rewire your patch panel, like we said, you're going to want a lot of the short 6-inch or 1 foot cables, and if possible, get the bootless cables. That means they don't have that extra little piece of plastic around them. When you're trying to wire 24, 48, or way more cables all right next to each other, it's really annoying to have those.
And it's not necessary to order it from Amazon, but in the office supply store, Staples, or some of the other ones that will have all of this equipment, including the network patch cables.
Yep. So you're definitely going to want to have some extra Ethernet cables on board, just because you never know. You're going to want to have extra surge protectors. Velcro strips are great for wrapping up cables and tying stuff down and making it neat.
Twist ties and tie wraps will work too, but the tie wraps are difficult to undo later if you need to get a cable out or move things around. And if you cut them, or at least they could cut even as you try to open them, they could cut the wires. So Velcro is usually the way to go and has the bonus of sticking to carpeting to help you hide wires around corners of offices.
Yep. And then bubble wrap, that you really just have to figure out what your movers want to do about servers. Some of them you can just unplug, turn them off, unplug them and set them in the hallway, and the servers will take them off, the movers will take them off for you. Others want you to have everything boxed up and wrapped and packed. So you just got to check with your movers on that one. I think we'll get into that later on a later slide here too. All right, so back to staff. Some staff are going to be super excited about the move and excited to plan their new office, and others are just going to be annoyed, and it doesn't matter what you do, this is going to be the case.
Yeah, it's important to set low expectations. Usually plan for we like a Friday move. So staff aren't working in the office on Friday, and the network won't be back until the end of the weekend.
Yeah, so you want to tell everybody network's going down Thursday night, and don't expect it to be back up till Monday morning. That way, even if you plan to do the whole move on a Friday, you still have all weekend to deal with any mess ups.
Any issues that may come up, your fault or not.
Yep. Yeah, because there's a lot of vendors to coordinate, and yeah, if you need the extra time, you've got it.
Yeah, some of the downtime and service outages will be less of an issue, as he said before, if you have services in the cloud, mostly email, web hosting, files. If all that stuff's in the cloud, it's less of a problem, and you really just need to get the internet up.
Yep, and it means staff can work from home while you're doing the move.
But we wouldn't recommend going to the cloud just for this move.
Right, you're just complicating things at that point.
Yeah, if you think, as we stated before, if you're thinking about it, go ahead and think about, like, before the 6-month period, you want to have a plan in place for migration so it's not conflicting with your plans for the move. Because you also want to give time to that so that it won't interfere with moving.
Yep. So other good ideas for staff is definitely to have a staff meeting, allow people to voice their concerns. Some of this is going to be petty stuff, like whether they get a window or whether it's who's got to share an office or who's next to the bathroom. But you still, as much as you can get all that information in beforehand, the better you can plan for it and make people happy at the new space.
Yeah, it's also a good time to show them the pre-move checklist that everyone has to do, and point out who the move coordinator is going to be if it's not you.
Yep, sometimes that's just another staff person, but that's somebody who knows everything that needs to be done, i.e. just helping staff unplug or be prepared to unplug their computers, get all the peripherals, get their boxes ready, make sure they know the number of their office so they can get everything to the new place.
Get the labels done.
Yep.
And there's also a good point where you'll be able to figure out who are your problem or your high-touch staff members are, so you know either you will have to walk them through it or just do the work for them.
Yep. Yeah, knowing who you're going to have to handhold is definitely helpful if you know it beforehand.
And a lot of times you already know who that is in your office.
Yep.
So it'd be good here at 1 month out to plan for that as well.
Okay, so now we're down to the move the week of. So this is a good time that you should really be figuring out who's moving what. As I mentioned before, sometimes the moving company will do the servers. Sometimes you need to do a lot more work. A lot of moving companies have a last in, first out policy for servers, where they'll pack up the entire office and then put the servers in last. And then you and the IT people can just ride with them to the new office, and they'll take the servers right out first, and you can get those back up so that the IT people can get the internet back up and the servers back online as soon as possible.
Ideally, I would recommend you ask for that from the movers too. If they don't mention it to you, recommend it to them that you want your servers up and running, and that also is helpful so IT staff isn't waiting around for the movers to unpack the entire truck to get to the servers.
Right, particularly if they charge per hour.
Particularly.
Yep. So actually packing up staff computers is another good point. I definitely prefer it when staff pack up their own computers because I think it helps them to make sure they get all their stuff in the right place. A lot of move companies we work with will either provide crates or big, like 3-gallon Ziploc bags, and you can fit a whole computer keyboard in there. They put their mice, speakers.
It's a good way to keep everything together, and again, it's a good time to have that checklist available again for staff to remind them, like, you have all this packed up, good to go.
Yep, so they'll have all their peripherals and their computer and monitor just packed up with labels on them that say office number 3 or Mike's office. And the movers will pick all that up, bring it to office number 3 or Mike's office, and then you, the IT company, just come in and set it all back up.
Yep.
And then lastly, staff should have solid time frame established. And this is just, again, being as communicative with staff as possible. It's just the best way to avoid people flipping out on you.
Although that does not exclude them from flipping out on you anyway.
It doesn't, but you do what you can.
And so at this point, we're going through our checklist to make sure we have everything we need. Is the ISP confirmed for the new space and the new time? Ideally, we like it to happen overlap. So we have the internet up in the new space before we move in. So the IT vendor or tech expert can go in and check and make sure it's working fine. So you have plenty of time to resolve any internet issues.
Yep. Yeah, that's huge, just having the overlap. Because then you know, well, yeah, your major issues are covered. But it's hard to do if you're keeping the same ISP, because they'll usually want to take your circuit and just move it over at the time of the move. So you can't always help that.
Yeah, but a lot of times the ISP will work with you and see and they can do what you would like them to do. You just need to ask.
Yeah. So other than that, it's just checklist stuff. Are your copiers moving? Are you getting new ones? Do you have to use a service elevator? Do you need keys to access the new building?
Or key cards and fobs.
Yep. And do you need to get those for all the people who are helping with the move? Or copiers for the movers, copiers for the IT people?
Mm-hmm. And I think something I would add is often when is the network going to be unavailable? In our experience, whatever time you set, someone will ask for 15 more minutes twice. So it's good to tell everyone the servers are going down at 5, but expect it to really be 6.
Yep. Yeah, people will always ask for an extension. All right, so this is some more logistics with the actual move. Obviously, desks need to get moved in before computers get moved in, otherwise you'll have everywhere to put them. If you're getting new modular furniture, it all needs to be built before the computers can go in. But then a lot of times desks and stuff get moved in and cover up the outlets and the jacks, and then you can't get behind them to actually plug stuff in, or then you or the IT people have to start pulling desks back out after they just got moved all in. So ways around it are either to ask the movers to leave them at least 6 inches from the wall so you can get back in there, or put power strips and internet cords in place before the furniture gets moved in.
And I think some other things to keep an eye on is the night before the move is when the servers go down. You want to make sure that everybody's off when you take them down. And again, make sure that you set up the servers or pack them away like the movers are expecting. If you trust them to move your stuff, but you should know by now if they're moving your servers or not. And it'd be good to have some tools, extra tools laying around just in case.
Oh yeah, make sure to bring your screwdrivers, drills, all that.
Yeah, just have them available. An IT company will usually bring their own stuff, but sometimes there's just a lot of hands and a lot of people going around. An extra screwdriver or an extra set of pliers could come in very handy.
All right, day of. So yeah, no such thing as a perfect move. There's always going to be stuff going wrong.
Yeah, once you have all the prep work done, you should get to be able to rebuild your new network in a new clean space with new wiring and switches. But of course, this all will be overshadowed with things going wrong. And although, the perfect move may be a unicorn, but that's not to say that your move will not be smooth.
Right. But here's some things that could go wrong.
And again, we beat on the ISP gong.
Yep.
We say this a lot because the ISP is probably the most often thing that runs into problems.
Yep, and it's the one thing we can't work around. If anything else is wrong, we can usually find a way around it for the time being, but this is the one thing we can't fix without getting the ISP involved. So the other thing, again, we've done a lot of moves, and I've never had a server get damaged in transit, but that's not to say it couldn't happen. So you really want to make sure you've got your backups are all good the week before, and also that your hardware warranties are all up to date on your servers.
As much as possible.
Right.
You want to also keep an eye out if you're hosting your email or website on site and you have to take that server offline. You want to make sure you handle this carefully and have contingency plans and prepare staff and your constituents, clients, or the people you serve that they know that you're going to be moving and that nothing horrible is happening. That you're just going to be off the internet for a while.
Yeah, if you still host your own email, have your own Exchange server, emails will be unavailable during the time that the server is physically in a truck. So ideally, you have another service that can spool it in the meantime, so that when people come back online, it'll all just sort of flood back in.
I find that in the beginning, around the 3 or 1 month mark, it's good to put on email signatures that you're moving, so everyone knows that you may be unavailable on this day for a period of time, not to call the police.
Yep. So other things that can go wrong, if you're changing your subnet for any reason, which does happen.
Yeah, just make sure to keep in mind about your other networking devices, and that's mostly copiers, printers, postage machines, security cameras, some things that you don't always have to deal with, but do need to connect to the internet or just your network to work. It's important to remember them, especially if you have to change IP addresses or change when you're changing the network.
Yep, anything with static IPs you'll need to update.
Indeed.
All right. Well, we went through that pretty quickly, but so yeah, here's the main issues: is ISP, ISP, ISP. That's the one thing. If it doesn't work, your office doesn't work. So do your best to plan for that. Secondly, take care of your staff. They're the ones who you want to be happy at the end of the day. So do everything you can to prepare them and plan for them and make them happy. And yes, definitely buy pizza for everybody who helps out. And then vendors, your IT company, the movers, everybody else, get them all involved as early as possible. Nobody wants to have it sprung on them at the last minute. Yeah, and don't forget about the phone vendors too. Oh, right. If you're keeping or switching your phone service, they want to be involved just as early as everybody else. So as soon as possible for those vendors, phone vendors, wiring vendors, copiers, the copier maintenance people.
Those two, they don't like to be forgotten either.
Nope. All right.
Great. Well, thank you both. We've got quite a few questions, so we'll get to those in just a second. Before we do, I wanted to just remind everyone that we have this webinar every month. And if you could advance the slide, next month we have a webinar on identifying IT risks. So this is an important part of the work that we do, and two of our network managers, Eva Townsend and Nura Aboki, are going to share sort of our overall criteria for identifying IT risks in an organization. So we encourage you to join us next month. It's the third Thursday, October 20th from 4 to 5 o'clock. When you leave the webinar today, so we could go to the next slide. If you leave the when you leave the webinar today, you're going to get a survey, and we look at that information and use it to continue to improve these webinars. We've been doing them for many years and really enjoy them, and we really rely on your feedback to make them better. So take a minute to answer that survey. If you missed anything or you'd like to go back and listen to the webinar again or run through the slides, we will send you links to the slides on our SlideShare account, as well as the recording on our YouTube channel, and we'll be posting those on our website. And you can connect with us on Facebook, on YouTube, find us on LinkedIn, and you can also read our blog on our website. So let's get to some questions. And the first few sets of questions have to do with drops, the network drops on the walls. So
Okay.
How do you verify? So the ideal situation is you come into a new office and you're doing a complete demo, complete build out, build it out to spec, and you can decide where the drops are, and you have brand new cabling and drops. That's ideal, but that doesn't often happen, or it doesn't always happen at least. Sometimes you come into an office and you've got existing cabling. How do you verify that the drops work and that they're labeled correctly?
So they should be labeled with a clear pattern. You should be able to walk around your office and find jack number 1, jack number 2, jack number 3, or jack number 304, 305, 306, whatever their scheme is.
Yeah, many cabling companies have a pattern. Sometimes it's clockwise, sometimes it's by room, where they'll label it, and you can find the jacks that you're looking for. But if they're not working or they don't seem to connect to where they look like they should, that's the time to bring in the wiring vendors to come and test it. Most wiring vendors will come out and just test jacks for you for a nice price.
Yep. And if you know what you're doing and are a little more comfortable back in the server room, you can look at the patch panel, and those numbers on the wall jacks correspond to numbers on the patch panel. So you should be able to find 304, 305, and 306 labeled right on the patch panel as well. And those should correspond to jacks out in the office. And if you can't find them, then that means either labels have fallen off, or labels, because they might have just been a sticker, they might have been mislabeled, things might have gotten changed. If that office has been rented by a number of different people who've done different renovations, sometimes you get multiple generations of jacks. You'll see different colors.
Yeah.
Only the gray ones will work and not the blue ones. If you get into that, it's definitely worth having somebody come in and just tone them all out and find out what works and relabel everything for you.
But if it's bad enough, it's sometimes just worth it to wipe everything out and start fresh with new jacks and have them pull out the old jacks.
Yeah, that was the next question. At what point do you just say this isn't worth trying to salvage? We'd be better off investing in, new drops, new cabling.
I've never seen anybody do a whole new, rent out an already built office and do a whole new jack setup. I think it's probably prohibitively expensive to get in all the walls and do it. And there's usually an existing framework to work off of.
No, I've actually ran across that once or twice, and it's when you get 3 or 4 jacks labeled 1 in one office. It's sometimes a pain, but necessary to just do it fresh from the beginning. Because the walls are sealed, it's harder for the cable companies to go in and run stuff, but they'll do it.
Yep.
And I guess the big driving factor is what your budget is. If you can afford to have them come and redo all the jacks as part of your project, great. But it's also good to check with the building. Sometimes they'll cover all that because the working jacks were part of your lease.
Right. Yeah, if you find out that early enough, you could definitely work it into your contract.
Yeah,
But yeah, I would say I've rarely seen that. Mostly you have somebody come in, test all the jacks, find out which ones works, and they could just pick a whole new labeling scheme for you and just relabel everything with the ones that work.
And fix the ones that are broken.
Right.
yeah. I think the worst situation I saw was one where it was an older office, and there were at least 3 generations of cabling. There had been at least 3 different cabling runs made, and so there were multiple jacks at every desk, and it wasn't all, and so we brought in a cabling company to tone the jacks and identify the ones that were the most current. And even after doing all that, there were a couple that, even though they toned properly, when you actually sat down and plugged in a computer, the networking was not reliable, and we ended up having to rerun a couple drops just to get them to work. So it's
Yep.
let's see. Related to that, what about you had mentioned network drops for printers and in the server room. What about for Wi-Fi? What's the best way to identify network drops for Wi-Fi? Should they go in the ceiling? Is it important to include power with the network drop?
That is an excellent question. So it really depends on the shape of your office and how big it is. Sometimes you have an office that kind of spiders out down different hallways, in which case you're going to need multiple access points. And I like to put them in the ceiling.
Yeah.
I think they're easy, but you need to put a little label on the drive or like on the suspended ceiling so you can find the thing again. Because if you just hide it up in there, when something goes wrong with it, you'll never find it again.
So in many cases already, that's the best practice. The cable companies will put a label on the nearest ceiling tile to where they put the jack. And so that's where it will be. Now, if the existing stuff doesn't work for you, you should need to run more, but that should be easy compared to doing it on the wall.
Yep. Yeah, putting it in the ceiling is way easier than a wall mount because you don't need a network jack stuck up halfway on up a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And
nowadays,
doing the PoE is the better way to go for that.
Yeah, so
you don't have power up there.
Nowadays, you don't need to have them run power to a Wi-Fi. A lot of enterprise class access points support PoE or power over Ethernet. So really, that'll go back to the switch. Make sure you get a switch. And I've seen small 8-port switches solely dedicated to wireless access points. That's always a good investment if you're rolling out new wireless.
Yeah, but that is enterprise class wireless. Your little Linksys wireless antenna is not going to work like that.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of wireless, how do you identify coverage requirements? Is there a tool that you can use when you're kind of looking at a blueprint, of a new office? How do you identify the heat map of where WAPs should go?
I don't have a good answer for that from a blueprint.
No, it's really this is where it's really important to visit the space ahead of time, and depending on how important wireless is to your office, you might want to get a wireless site survey, and you can do it yourself if you have a laptop and an access point that you can plug in, and you just go around the office and just collect the data yourself, like how good is your wireless signal over here and over there. I think there's a good program such as Cider, I think Insider, INSSIDER, or no ER, that will let you check the signal levels and keep track as you wander around the office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so again, I don't know from a blueprint, but from within the office, like Will said, you can actually bring your Wi-Fi antenna and it doesn't have to be connected to the internet.
Yeah.
You can plug it in and then walk around the office. I use a Android app called Wi-Fi Analyzer. It's nothing special. And you can just walk around with it, walk into different offices and see how strong a signal you'll get.
I think some things we've run across so far is glass, wireless through glass, especially multiple panes of glass. can drop the signal a lot. So keep that in mind when you're making a build out. If you have lots of glass windows for like a conference room,
Yep.
you may have to put an access point on the opposite side of that to avoid the signal drop that may occur.
Okay, great. Let's see, we got another question. You had mentioned, and I think it was really good advice, basically telling staff we're taking the servers down. They're going to be unavailable starting, Friday at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and you won't have access to them until Monday morning. And I think it's really good advice to set that expectation, even if you're expecting the servers to be back up Saturday morning, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yep.
I do think in most cases, the request from staff is going to be, okay, what can I do? I need to work on X, Y, or Z. How do I get access to that information? What are some workarounds that you've seen or that you've used to provide access to key staff with the information they need, while the servers are down?
Right. So the simplest one is just tell them to save stuff to the desktop of their laptop and go work from home. But now we've got Dropbox and other options like that.
I would encourage the flash drive or the computer before I would recommend going to a third-party service, because sometimes someone puts something in there and that never comes out, and we want to make sure it gets put back into the system that gets backed up every day. So I would stick with the download it to a laptop, hand it to the key personnel. It's like, you can work from this laptop, and maybe in a pinch you can get one of those USB 3G, 4G dongles for them to use if internet might be a pinch. And in general, if you have ISP problems, it may not be too difficult to go and grab one of those during move day just to use while you're waiting for movers to move stuff in.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. We have had to do that somewhere where the ISP was a problem during a move and didn't show up. We had to go, I forget if we used Cricket or whatever, but that mobile wireless antenna, or what do you call them? Hotspots. Yeah, and just had to put them around the office for a week until the ISP problems got resolved. Just to have some sort of internet at the office.
Is that the best solution? If you do have, let's say you went ahead and you ordered, fiber, and you ordered Comcast, but Verizon goes on strike, and so your fiber install date is delayed, and then, Comcast loses your order, and so that install date is delayed, and now you've got a move date with no internet. Is the mobile access point the best solution, your only solution? What are some plan Bs you can have sort of ready to go in that eventuality?
It's one of the best solutions I can think of. Just if your ISP is going to be there within the week and you just need a temporary coverage.
Yeah, it also depends on how soon before move day that all the ISPs fail on you. Sometimes you can switch to a different ISP that has faster, that can get you in faster if you have enough time.
Right. If Comcast fails on you, Verizon might be able to hook you up the next day. Unlikely, but it's always, if you have time to figure it out.
Yeah, but if it's a week before, you can plan to have a month-to-month contract with your local cell company to just have a mobile hotspot. And I really haven't seen any others. Sometimes your building will have its own Wi-Fi that you can use, but I have not seen that a lot. But I've seen that in a couple of places.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well,
or you could pay to bite off the local Starbucks if they're close enough. If they're in the bottom of your building.
I mean, certainly, some of the other suggestions that you made earlier, both planning for having redundant internet connections not only helps, after you've moved in, but it helps with the move itself. Planning the install date several weeks in advance of your move, if that's possible, gives you some flexibility there. And then if all else fails, you can go with the mobile hotspot, and potentially also just treat it like a snowstorm and you've kind of got staff on
Oh, yeah.
telework,
Right.
So great. Well, William, Rick, thank you both very much for sharing your time and your expertise with us this afternoon, and wish you all the best with whatever moves you've got coming up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.